Welcome to the Tipping Point Show. I'm Jimmy Evans. I'm so glad that you've joined me today. I have joining me again on the show today my dear friend, Pastor Lee Cummings, and we're going to be talking about his book called Take Heed, Watch, and Pray, Overcoming Deception in the Last Days. We had a fantastic conversation last week. Pastor Lee, thank you for joining me today.
It's so good to be back with you.
We're talking about your book, Take Heed, Watch, and Pray. Now, this was a series of messages, actually, that you preached at your church too, right?
Yeah, it was a series of messages that I preached in 2019, and then after 2020, after 2020, right. I came back and I felt like the Lord was breathing on it again, added some stuff to it and preached some more of it, and it became this book.
It's a fantastic book, and we really just scratched the surface last week, but especially the subtitle is Overcoming Deception in the Last Days. Lee, I just never thought I would live in a world like this. I just never thought I would see the level of deception. I saw an interview the other day on TV. This is Fox News, major news network, and there was a woman being interviewed, and she was saying that math was racist, and that saying 2 + 2 = 4 is racist because there's no such thing as absolute truth. And that's the world we're living in right now.
Yeah, it's the world pulled over our eyes. 30 years ago, if somebody had transported you in time and put up on a TV screen, this is what the world will look like 30 years from now. You will have Supreme Court Justice nominees who won't be able to answer the question, what a woman is. Think about that. Math is going to be racist. You're going to have people from the Satanic Church opening up city council meetings in prayer. Yeah. You're going to have pedophiles now classified as minor attracted persons.
Right.
You're going to have parades down the major streets of America that are going to be protesting Israel, that are going to be protesting everything that you can think of. No one in the world would have believed that would become a reality. But yet here we are.
It's unbelievable. I want to get back into your book because you're just talking about real issues, and I just say, if you're wanting just to get some meat and get to a mindset, end time mindset to encourage yourself in the Lord, this is the book right here, dealing with real issues. I want to start talking about, last week we ended by talking about Israel, and I want to encourage people, if you didn't hear the podcast last week, go back and listen to it. It's fantastic. But you have a chapter in your book, chapter 5, it talks about a must-have military mindset. Talk about that.
Yeah. Well, Paul uses military language all the time when he's addressing the church as far as how they position themselves. And unfortunately, I think because many of us have grown up in America, Western Christian nation, Judeo-Christian principle worldview, we've become soft. We've shown up to a battle in our beach clothes. We thought it was a cruise ship, and we didn't realize the church is meant to be a battleship.
Right.
That the Christian life is not like a spiritual war; it is a spiritual war.
Right.
And in peace times, where it seems as if everybody goes to church. 50 years ago, everybody went to church. Everybody respected people that were Christians or church-going people at least. And today you're viewed as an extremist, you're dangerous, you need to be canceled. And it's because there's been a radical divergence between the culture that we live in and the kingdom that we're a part of. And what that requires, to live in that tension, requires exactly what Paul said to Christians that were living in the midst of the Roman Empire. You have to have a military mindset, not a peacetime mindset. That's what Paul's talking about putting on the armor of God, the full armor of God, so that you might be able to stand. And that's never been more pressing and real and needed for us than the generation that's living in the midst of what I believe is a Romans 1 moment. We're in a Romans 1 moment in American culture where because we've refused to acknowledge God, because we've suppressed the truth, we are entering into a spiritual and even an intellectual insanity where God's like, if you don't want me, watch, I'll take my hand right off. I'll give you over to what you want to. And it's across the board. And in the midst of that kind of a culture, if we're going to be victorious Christians, that are living in the strength of the Holy Spirit, we can't be walking around in our spiritual flip-flops. We have to have our spiritual combat boots on.
You know, there's this Butker, who is the kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs. He gave a commencement speech at a Catholic university where he was just talking about what the Bible says. You know, pro-life, traditional marriage, anti-abortion, all those kind of things like that. Well, he gave that speech, and there had been like 160,000 signatures on a petition trying to force the Kansas City Chiefs to fire him for saying what the Bible has to say. Yeah. And interestingly,
for things that used to be viewed as virtuous.
That he used to be. Billy Graham said everything he said. Yeah. And so, but the people just go crazy. To me, if you want to hear what the devil has to say, just listen to The View on, all those ladies go crazy, and I'm not picking on women. There's a bunch of crazy men out there too. But they immediately go off and they want this guy, canceled and fired. Well, his jersey is selling more now than Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. And what that's showing is he's resonating with people. People out there don't believe in the craziness that's going on. They believe in what this guy's saying, but they want to, you're a fascist. If you don't agree with what they're saying, you're a fascist. They call you names. We're not fascists. We just believe what the Bible has to say.
Yeah, there's a silent minority, or a silent majority, I believe, that's out there, that's just intimidated and afraid to speak up.
Right.
And, what this man said in that graduation speech, by the way, to a Catholic university, to other people, he wasn't preaching this to saying, hey, everybody needs to be like this, although it's true. But he's preaching to Catholics. He was sharing out of his own faith as a follower of Christ in the Catholic tradition, saying, look, I'm blessed to have a wife who prioritizes our family. We believe in the value of life. I mean, these kind of simple things that now you're getting canceled for. I think there are a lot of people who are quietly sitting in the back agreeing with that. That's why they're buying the jerseys, but they're not the ones given the platforms. And that goes right along with chapter 6 of the book. It's called the Battle for the Altar. It's the story of Gideon. Gideon's living in a time when Israel, God's people, they're under oppression by the Midianites and the Amalekites. And Gideon is in a wine press just trying to shuck enough wheat in order to, he's in survival mode. He's not in thrive mode. He's going to sneak back into the cave. And the Lord shows up and says, you mighty man of valor, calls him out, tells him you're going to be a deliverer in Israel. And you're going to challenge and you're going to inspire my people to rise up and push back Baal, destroy the altar of Baal, rebuild the altar of the Lord. And we know that Gideon became a voice that called the people of God to rise up and be restored, to destroy the altar of the enemy and to rebuild the altar of the Lord. I think we're living in a very similar situation.
Absolutely.
Where God's raising up voices like Tipping Point, like you, like churches all over America. Hopefully we're doing our part of it. And then just average everyday people who are like, you know what, we're not going to live by this anymore. We're going to stand up. We're going to build, as for me and my house, we're going to build the altar of the Lord. And we're not going to fall prey to the deception that's taking place.
Yeah, I noticed that Target has not, this Christmas season coming up, they're toning down their LGBT things, is what they're saying, in their the news is saying. That is because a group of people stood up and said, no, you're not shoving this to Disney. They're toning it down after losing billions of dollars. They're toning it down because people are standing up. And like Butker, this kicker, an NFL kicker is now standing up in the midst of this culture and saying, I'm not going to stand back any longer, and I'm going to say this. And now he's become a champion. Yeah. And so, Gideon was living in that time where they were terrified and they were outnumbered.
That's right.
And what God did through Gideon was show that 300 people full of God that are not afraid can defeat any army that comes before them. And we just need people to stand up, and pastors. Lee and I, we are both pastors, and we understand pastoring very well, and we both pastored. You pastor a very large, growing church. I pastored a church that grew to over 10,000 people, still thriving church. And we preach the truth lovingly and graciously. We preach the truth. We never back away from the truth. And what we find is, even though some people don't like it, most people, they want to have someone addressing the real issues.
That's right. That's right. And they're looking for Gideons. They're looking for voices that are going to rise up out of the winepress and are going to state the truth at a time when it feels like we're surrounded by the Amalekites. And interestingly enough, the Amalekites under Amalek were the first people to come against Israel, to try to keep them from coming into the promised land. They were the first ones to declare war. And we're still seeing the descendants of the Amalekites in that territory today, still persecuting God's people. But the spirit of Amalek is alive and well all over the planet. It's the Antichrist spirit.
That's right.
And the closer we get to the manifestation, the full manifestation of the Antichrist, we're at least going to see the spirit of Antichrist. You know, John said in 1 John, there are many Antichrists. And even now that spirit is at work. Well, we're seeing it on steroids right now.
Absolutely.
And the more that spirit of Amalek is being raised up in generations and in different atmospheres, education, media, even in the corporate world, you know, DEI standards and Marxism being taught in our universities and all those types of things, they're spiritual in origin. The answer for the Christian is not to run and hide in the winepress. The answer for the Christian is to be filled with the Spirit of the living God, to be walking in truth and realize that 300 with God is stronger than 30,000 without God.
That's exactly right. And see, the thing that we don't want to do is to stir people up so you go to work and tell everybody they're going to hell, you know, or to, you know, stand out in your front yard and, you know, start yelling at all the cars going by. What we want to say is, when the time comes for you to open your mouth and speak the truth, speak the truth. Do it lovingly, do it graciously, speak, don't shrink back. You're like this kicker for the Chiefs. His moment came when he was given a microphone and had the opportunity to preach the truth. He preached the truth. And what he's doing is now going viral to help encourage a generation to live for God. And whatever. So when your moment comes, if you're a pastor, if you're a secretary, if you're a plumber, whoever you are, when your moment comes, graciously, lovingly speak the truth and be a Gideon. Don't shrink back, because God wants, in this critical generation, when we're being overwhelmed with an Antichrist spirit, it's time to stand up and speak the truth.
That's right. And you said it, and I think it's so important. Paul said it, let your words be seasoned with grace. Yeah. You know, when you watch the speech that this man gave, he had a smile on his face. Yeah. He was thrilled to be talking about his family and his wife. And we need to be able to give an answer. We need to be able to speak the truth. But also, Christians need to live the truth. You know, that's the key. You can have all the answers, but if your lifestyle is like everybody else's, it doesn't make any difference. It's like the number one thing we can do is believe the truth, then live the truth, then share the truth. And you do that, and you have your words and your lifestyle seasoned with grace. It's attractive to people. They're looking for answers right now.
You bet it is. Just being full of joy, and, you know, having a loving marriage and a loving family and things like that. Love is the most attractive thing in the world right now. You know, it's just demonstrating the love of Jesus to people. One of the chapters, I want to be sure and talk about this, chapter 8, deception, hell's nuclear weapon, and I absolutely believe that. And that's the one going off right now.
Yeah, it's a bomb that has just gone off, and we're seeing the radioactive overflow of seeds of deception that were sown into our culture 40 and 50 years ago. Really, I mean, there's always deception. Deception's always hell's atomic option. It's what the enemy used in the garden.
Right.
It's what the enemy tried to use even against the Son of God in the wilderness of temptation. And it's what he uses against every single one of us. But what we're seeing is a generational deception that is taking root. You know, you can go back in time. I think it's really interesting. You go back in time and you look at the introduction of certain belief systems into our culture in the 60s. It became known as the counterculture revolution. Marxism, Eastern religion, drugs, free sex, feminism, abortion rights that were all birthed around certain ideologies, experimentation with other religions. Those things spurred a counterculture revolution. And then it just felt like in the 70s or 80s, it's like, okay, we've gone back to normal. But the reality is those seeds of deception were sown into a generation of people who then spent the next 20 years getting to positions of authority as judges and teachers with tenure, of politicians, of movie makers, of network television presidents, you name it, all across the board. And then in the last decade, what we've seen is we've seen all of those people come into maturity, just like unrighteousness comes into the full maturity. We've seen it explode onto the scene in our culture. And there's so many people that are like, what has happened? Where did this all come from? Well, it happened because those seeds were sown a generation ago. But deception is spiritual in its origin, and it is always hell's atomic weapon.
It's happening today. It's the number one problem that people are facing. And I just want to say to parents out there, you just have to look at where you're sending your kids to college. Because, 1 Corinthians 15:33 says, don't be deceived, bad company corrupts good morals. You can put the good morals into them. You put them in bad company, they're going to come out. And when you send your kids to be taught by some Marxist atheist who hates Israel and hates God and hates everything else, don't be surprised when your children go to college and renounce their faith, in the next year or two or whatever. And we see it all the time. We have to have a military mindset, understanding that we're in a war. And as parents, we're responsible for our children to protect them from that deception, not to usher them into it. And I think you were talking about, the universities. There are a lot of people who they think, I need to get an education, get a career. Great. Not indoctrination and hell. We have our Tipping Point Prophecy Conference coming up September 20th and 21st. At Fellowship Church in Grapevine, Texas. That's Friday night and all day Saturday with Dr. David Jeremiah, Dr. Mark Hitchcock, Max Lucado, Ed Young, Rabbi Jonathan Kahn, Billy Crone, myself. We're going to have a fantastic 2 days together of just, first of all, getting together and encouraging each other in the Lord in the end times that we're living in, the intense times that we're living in, and to hear from the greatest prophecy teachers in the world today on what God is saying now and getting their comments and thoughts on the things that are happening in real time. I want you to be a part of that. Go to endtimes.com. Just go to conference there. You have reserved seats. You can get your own seats. The front two sections are already full. Of the main front section, we have two sections we've already shut down. Others are filling up. So if you haven't gotten your tickets yet, go to endtimes.com. We want to see you there. I want you to bring people with you. I want you to bring a group from your church. And many of you church leaders that are listening to this right now, you can bring a busload of people down, or a van load full of people down to the conference. We would love to have you. Like I said, Friday night is going to be Dr. David Jeremiah live via video with myself and also Dr. Mark Hitchcock. On Saturday, we have great speakers. We also have our expert panel that's going to be joining us again that day. I'll be on that panel. And so answering questions in real time from the audience. And so come be a part of this End Time Conference, September 20th, 21st, Grapevine, Texas. And when you're buying your tickets there on endtimes.com, we have hotel information, restaurant information, airline information, and Fellowship Church is 5 minutes from DFW Airport. So, it's just right there. So we would love to have you. I want to see you there this coming September 20th and 21st.